Ahoy! I am super excited right now and I have to drop this as quickly as possible. I'm not going to do my usual editing. I need to show you what is happening in New World Update 3.03 because this may be some of the most important balance changes for PvP especially that we've ever seen in New World. I think this may be some of the biggest stuff. Even though it's not that many changes, they are just very, very impactful and I am super happy with this. So I'm just gonna show you the other stuff real quick. You can see the skins here, pretty cool new skins, very dark aesthetic. We have the Turkulent event coming back, and we have general stuff here that you can see. Certain fixes here, spawn rates, quest lines, blah blah blah. Some mutation leaderboards fixes as well, score fixes. But what I want to talk about here are the combat changes because, oh boy. So first we have Scorpion Sting. This has a trade-off now of increasing the Javelin cooldown by 50%. I think that's a bit much, but maybe they can find a middle ground there in the future. I think that's just hitting it a bit too hard from my perspective anyways. Lost Stopwatch changed the duration from a 100% increase to a flat 1 second increase, meaning long CCs, long stuns won't benefit as much, but generally it'll be a bit more consistent and it'll be especially good for shorter CCs in comparison, for very short stuns, which would be relevant with the next patch as well with Boltcaster. But on the other hand, increase the damage reduction trade-off from 5% to 10%, so you really have to sacrifice something for that utility now. Odo gets a small buff, I would say. So updated functionality to include that the damage bonus applies to knock down targets, which makes a lot more sense with a Flail because you have a knockdown and you have a follow-up hit from that. It's a bit of a mixed one because even with that, it's a 20% more damage effect, which is less than Transient Strikes, I think. And you still want to have Burning Smite on there, so you still have Ref Move and Life Stealing. So it's a solid Flail now, I would say. If it's not the best in slot Flail in my opinion, but it's a solid Flail for quite a few situations, quite a few builds, depending on what exactly you're after. Yeah, you still kind of get like a Plagued Strikes, for example, so I'd say that's still not ideal. And the secondary passive with the 5% base healing, it's also okay at best, but yeah, if you don't have anything better, then at least you have some benefits from the other passive now, so it's a start. And then we have the biggest change that I have been asking for so long, so if any of the devs are watching this, thank you so much for including this. So basically, Pestilence is the first anti-heal weapon that actually works, because with every other anti-heal weapons, you always had the problem that overall the anti-heal was just too ineffective to really have enough value, and Pestilence is the first one that you really notice, and the other ones just had too many conditions as well. It was always like they need to crit and the enemy needs to be below 50% health or something. That is just, yeah, okay, fair enough. That's just not gonna be good enough. But now we have all player diseases, all, added an outgoing healing penalty to all disease status effects equal to half of the incoming healing reduction. So this includes Plague Crits, Plague Strikes, Plague Splitting Grenade, Infected Throw, Putrefying Scream, PvP Arena Heals Reduction. I'm assuming this would also include some more things like the Greatsword ability, for example. I'm not sure why that's not in here, Skyward. But anyways, this means that if you're anti-healing a healer, then they will heal for less, they will heal others for less, or they will also heal themselves for less. And that's just, again, that's how Pestilence works, and it makes it so much more effective, and it's really gonna make anti-heal somewhat relevant. Which, for the longest, I run anti-heal everywhere, but you can run double anti-heal, you can run the Heart Rune, which, again, also not mentioned here, for example. You can run the Bile Bomb, and you can run Plague Strikes along with it, and the healer will still heal as if there's nothing on them, so, or heal someone else if it's nothing on them that you apply the debuffs to. So this will take a little bit of that away, at least if you are targeting a healer specifically, if you are specifically counter-building a healer, which in many PvP scenarios I think you should be doing, and getting some more benefits out of that is great. And to extend that, playing crits removed the health requirement. It can now be refreshed while active. So this will no longer be at 50% health only, this will always be when you crit, which makes it very, very effective because it will be very consistently applied. And again, it can be refreshed here as well. So that's also useful. And for Plague Strikes, you also get the effect here. It can now be refreshed while active. So Plague Crits, in my opinion, the bigger winner here overall, because It's just something you will apply much more consistently, whereas Plague Strikes has a bit more... You have to have a bit more intention behind that. You have to specifically do a heavy attack. It doesn't just coincidentally happen. But between those two, and then the healing penalty on the heal themselves, I think we will see a very strong rise in disease actually being useful, and healers having to play more careful, and healers being punished for just thinking they're safe, basically. And that's what I know a lot of players have been asking for, and a lot of players have been asking specifically for nerfs to healers, and I have been saying, you don't need to nerf healers, you just need to buff Antiheal so it's actually good, so people can actually counterplay with it, and that's exactly what they did here. So, fantastic. No notes. Of course, we'll have to see if this is gonna be super impactful or not, because it's not the same as Pestilence. It's a lower healing reduction for the outgoing healing. It's just something we need to try out, right? We need to see if this is effective, if this is strong enough. But I think it's a great step in the right direction, so I'm very much looking forward to trying it out and then see if it's working. If they then get Purifying crits to actually work as well, we're gonna have a field day. And we are not done with healing. We have a lot more when it comes to healing. We have Shirking heals, increase the cooldown from 5 seconds to 10 seconds. Now, seeing this is going to be, I think, a massive shock for some players. Being like, okay, it was already nerfed before, and, you know, it's still interacting with Ankh, and now it's getting nerfed again. And I'm skeptical about the 10 seconds. I think the 10 seconds may be too much. I did the numbers for Shirking heals back in the day, and I thought that it was already significantly better than some other options, even pre-Ankh. So it made sense to me that they would possibly nerf it further. But I feel like the Shirking heals with 10 seconds cooldown is kind of saying, okay, if you want to run this effectively, you have to run it with Ankh, because it has a 10 seconds cooldown now. And then you might get more effective health out of it, but that's a lot of conditions that need to be met. So I think I would have rather seen them just untie the Ankh effect entirely from Shirking heals, or just increase the cooldown slightly, maybe to like 7 seconds or something, then go all the way up to 10. I think 10 is pretty rough. But I'm also not entirely opposed to it, because I think Shirking heals had a bit too much of a time to shine lately. So yeah, for me it's not an issue, because I can just switch back to whichever other gear. Like I'm using 2 pieces of Shirking heals right now. I don't personally am not very affected by this, but I do think that Shirking heals builds should be able to exist. I think they should have their niche. I think that's fine. Yeah, I don't know if this will end up being too much. I do think it might be. I'll do the numbers again and see how it really feels. But yeah, it seems a bit over the top so far, especially with all the other healing stuff that is happening as well. Then we have slash physical ward and absorptions. This is a very interesting and kind of unexpected change. Updated all physical ward and slash ward gems and perks to include bleed damage as a part of slash damage reduction to function similarly to other dots. I was not aware that this is like the idea. Like, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, for example, if you have a fire gem, a ruby, you probably reduce the damage over time from rubies as well. But I do think this is an interesting approach. I think this is kind of a result of finisher being used in PvP, and people doing these like kind of passive builds where they just bleed stacking and playing very defensive until they can flourish and finish, and the damage of that just kind of cutting through most of the defense because it's bleeds. So I can see why they're doing this. I can see why this is included. And this is especially relevant in the context of Onyxes. Of course, this will also affect other builds. This will affect the Butcher, which I don't think is particularly strong. This will affect Spears, their bleeds, for example, as well. So yeah, it's something worth keeping in mind. Keenly Jagged will be affected by this. Quite a few components here that will be reduced. I think Keenly Jagged affects probably most players. Exhaustive Net Shot had the duration reduced from 8 seconds to 4 seconds. Now, Exhaustive Net Shot, in my opinion, was so strong that if you were not running a full burst Blunderbuss, this was the best weapon perk to have on it. Like, my Blunderbuss right now has Exhaustive Net Shot, if you're not using Pestilence when you need the gem slot. I do think that this perk was always too strong. I think they could have nerfed the value of the exhaust itself. I think it's a bit odd that it's still above the stamina region cap that we currently have with 60% on weapon. But I think Exhaustive Net Shot is going to remain a solid perk for sure, even with a 4 seconds duration. I thought 8 seconds was always a bit crazy. But less of a perk that you would put on your weapon and maybe more of a perk that you just put on your armor instead. That's my impression here anyways. But very much a fair nerf in my eyes. And there are more nerfs to Blunderbuss. And I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who's been enjoying Blunderbuss a lot lately. Been trying it out more. But I will tell you that I'm not opposed to any of the nerfs they're doing here. So they increased the base damage in PvE by 3.75% and reduced the base damage in PvP by an additional 3.62% to keep the PvP damage the same. So basically this is not actually a damage nerf for PvP. This is just a damage increase for PvE. That just is like leveling it out. They did a base damage nerf to the PvP side very recently already, so they're doing some other changes this time. The Last Chance passive reduced the Fortify from 50% to 30%. This is kind of funny. This was like a full damage absorption at some point, and now it's a Fortify, and now it's gone from 50 to 30. I think that is fine, though. I think that was too much of a safety net. That wasn't really necessary on a weapon that isn't really built around having safety nets in the first place. It felt a bit out of place, especially because you could proc it on other weapons as well and stuff. And then we have weapon swapping. Then we have the Honor Roll passive, which is also a Fortify, made so that each stack has its own unique duration. I will tell you that I personally don't even run that perk. You may run it in like war builds and utility builds more. I personally think that perk is kind of a bit overrated because it's just a 3% Fortify for 10 seconds. Yeah, sure. You can probably... I don't think the stacking will make much of a difference. You can probably still stack it fairly consistently because the duration is so long, and you're usually proccing abilities fairly quickly, and then you're swapping off the weapon at some point anyways. For the primary fire, they reduced the damage coefficient from 23% per pellet to 21% per pellet. So that is a slight damage reduction anyways, and I think as far as I understand it, this would also affect PvE. So I guess this PvE buff is kind of offsetting this, which is then a bit confusing with this, like why not just do it differently or whatever, but I don't know, it's fine. it's a small nerf to the damage here. And Azoth Shrapnel Blast has the damage reduced from 50% per pellet to 45% per pellet. That is 5 pellets by default, but pretty much everyone is using this with the Discord perk, which is an additional 4 pellets. So we're talking about a total of 9 pellets here, which means this is a pretty significant damage decrease. This is a 45%, not a 45% overall damage decrease, but a 45% scaling decrease for the entire ability, which, considering the total scaling, yeah, still pretty good damage. Don't worry about that. But I also don't think actually you're not hitting all projectiles once. Anyways, damage reduction is what it is. So yeah, fair enough on this one. I think the Blunderbuss needed some more nerfs. It's fine with me. I don't think it's over nerfed for this, but I also think it's not overly broken after this. Pestilence is also going to fall out of favor a little bit with Antiheal in general being better, I think. So this might be the standing point for Blunderbuss for a while. The next one is going to make some people very unhappy. That is Lifestaff. Splash of Light. Reduce the radius from 100 meters to 25 meters. They did this before when Sandworm came out because they thought they weren't going to be able to limit it to your own group and it would be raid-wide and it would be a problem. That didn't happen because they figured out how to do it just for your group, and now they're doing the radius reduction anyways. But I can see why they're doing it too, because it's just allowing you, especially in PvP, to be very far away from your group, be very safe, and consistently provide a lot of healing to all of them without putting yourself at any form of risk. And I think they kind of want to limit the ability to do that, and yeah, reducing the range of Splash of Light in that regard is pretty effective. Especially, I can just basically tell a personal story here when we were playing some company 3v3s, just sniping each other and fighting each other. One of the guys in our company decided that the strat would be to just sit away on the entirely opposite side of the sand, like the desert arena, the gladiator arena, the brimstone arena, just as far away as possible and basically AoE heal from there, which worked decently well with Splash, and it's maybe something that shouldn't work that well. So, you know, I can see where they're coming from with this. And again, keep in mind, this is on top of the other anti-heal effects we're getting here, so this is some pretty hefty nerfs for healers. Void Gauntlet. Void Blade removed the duration limit of Void Blade, now remains active until the weapon becomes inactive. That is decent, but unfortunately not really solving the issue. Because unless you're specifically sitting on Void Gauntlet, it takes away some annoyance here, that's for sure. But unless you're specifically only sitting on Void Gauntlet, you're probably going to switch off around that time anyways. Like some builds of full utility Void Blade's fine. But in most situations, the problem with Void Gauntlet and Void Blade is more so that you want to be able to use abilities on your other weapon and then come back to the Void Gauntlet and be able to use your Void Blade again without getting punished. That's the biggest frustration point. And this doesn't really solve that. It's a start, but it doesn't really solve that because you're still going to have the cooldown. I think it's been suggested many, many times. I think they should just make Void Gauntlet or Void Blade a toggle so that that whole cooldown issue goes away and you can just choose to use it as a melee weapon and you can actually swap to your other weapon and use other abilities in between and then swap back, and you still have the trade-off of having to toggle it again. So yeah, I don't see the problem here. If Flamethrower can be a toggle, I don't understand why Void Blade can't. But hey, again, it's a start. There's also a very important fix here that I'm sure will be affecting the Flail based on the wording. Fixed an issue that caused several staggering attacks to not trigger the increment for the breakout dodge, which I know certain Flail attacks don't. That's going to be a very important fix insofar that you will actually be able to stagger, dodge, or like dodge out of the stagger combos that Flails can do, especially if you're getting hit by multiple Flails. And also fixed an issue with attacks that didn't stagger but unintentionally incremented the breakout dodge. I'm not sure which ones that are, but I remember something about that. So good, that's fixed too. There's also a change to the PvP reward track named items. Prevented the certain items from being upgradable beforehand. So to address this, we've added new versions of the PvP reward track named items with a 5th generated perk. Unlike the original, these new named items can be upgraded at a gypsum kiln. To make it easier for adventurers to distinguish the two, the old PvP reward track named items no longer have the name tag. That is going to be interesting because that may mean that if you have any of the old refreshing ward pieces specifically, those may still exist as unnamed items and they may still work. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case, but that would be somewhat funny and somewhat awkward. Which means that especially if you rushed a lot of PvP track early this season, you would kind of get rewarded. If you have the 680 version of those named items, be fairly strong in comparison. We'll see. Could be worth keeping those if you have any of them, because you can kind of get more refreshing than anyone else that way. I think they should take those out. I think they should balance that somehow, but for now it seems like they're just unnamed. There's some other changes. Specifically for Arena here, this was basically an exploit or multiple exploits, some dupes, some like dupes for something relatively unimportant, but it's spore potions, and then there was the buff exploit with from the Artemis boon effect. You could use that in places where you're not supposed to use it and stuff. So yeah, that's all fixed. Along with that, description for Azos and Doctor been updated. Chromatic Ward. This is the walls passive with the elemental reduction. That was fixed, so this is now working properly. Then there's a fix here that was already on the PTR, so I'm gonna read it again. The Beast Hordes are meant to drop loot at a higher gear score, so that should be happening now. And the aptitude crates from the faction shop specifically will no longer award 2 to 3 rare tier 5 materials, but now 60 to 120 tier 5-2 materials, which is still not that valuable for most players at this point, I think, but it's something. And the mithril earrings and rings are finally swapped around. Then we have some fixes here to wars, and we have a test run on Abaton for simultaneous influence races. We'll see how that plays out. We have a bunch of other smaller fixes here, smaller changes, various other things that are not really worth discussing in detail, but that you can see here. But overall, I think this patch is going to have a massive impact on the PvP meta, and it's especially going to affect my personal playstyle. So I'm very curious to see, on one hand, obviously the Antiheal effect, on the other hand, the Blunderbuss Nerfs. But yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think there have been a lot of complaints about healing lately, and I was somewhat concerned, especially in the light of, with next season, we're going to get the focus gems, and healers can actually do a fair bit more damage than currently. I was kind of worried where that would lead for healers, but I think we now have a clear pathway here in terms of what you can do against it if you want to. And we also have various other somewhat concerning perks, or somewhat annoying perks, more limited. Again, I'm not super happy with all of them. I think Scorpion Sting, for example, Shirking heals, that maybe went a bit too far on, but we'll see about that in the future. For now, I'm pretty excited with what they've done. As soon as there's more, I of course let you know. Tomorrow we'll be talking about Boltcaster, the new artifact bow, and how that really works and scales. And then the day after, we'll also be talking about the whole elemental gem changes on PTR. So if you're interested in that, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. Thanks to my patrons for supporting this video. I will not have the scroll today because I am just uploading this as quickly as possible, as raw as it is. That will be back tomorrow. And thank you for watching this video. SLOTH out.